You're listening to the Vendor's Daughter podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Calderon, also known as the Vendor's Daughter. I started this podcast about 7 years into working at my family's business. At the time, and really ever since, I've been geeking out on two main topics: self-improvement and business growth and development. I firmly believe that the healthier we are, both mentally and physically, the better we show up for ourselves, our lives, and our businesses. So, on the show, we talk a lot about things like a positive mindset, why what you eat matters, why it's important to move your body, and how a gratitude practice can change your life. And because growing a business is my favorite topic ever, we also interview entrepreneurs from various fields so that they can share how they grew their business. Which means along the way, we'll also talk about things like email list, growing an Instagram, and knowing when it's time to hire your next employee. You guys, the only thing I might like to talk about more than business is coffee. I love coffee. So grab a fresh cup and listen in as we deep dive into all the things. Really need to be a meeting, but okay, fine.
I know. Are people nervous?
I think our customers are nervous. Our team members are just ready to go back to normal. I don't
as normal as it can be.
As normal as it can be. We're just in it'll be an interesting 60 days. We got the PPP loan, which was great, but we still only have 30% of our customers back online right now.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a touch and go, see if we make it, if there'll be money still in the account at the end of 60 days, I guess is what we're looking at. So everyone's a little bit come on, bring them back. And I was like, I can't force people to go to the office.
No,
so
I know. Well, especially with only 30% of your customers back, do you even need everyone back yet? Although I guess if you have PPP, you kind of have to.
We had
right?
to. And so that was good. And with unemployment being so overwhelmed right now, a lot of our team members, although they filed for unemployment, they still hadn't received any of their checks. And so we were so excited just to bring them back so they could have some money in their pocket again. But you are just kind of making up jobs. I actually think that's probably why there's so many meetings right now, because it's everyone's trying to look like they're doing something. So I'm okay, whatever. I'll pop in real fast.
Right. Sure. Let's make this happen. That makes sense.
Yeah, let's make it happen. How was Oklahoma?
It was really good. It was a nice change of pace. But it was so funny because we got there and it's this little town of Hachatown or Hachawa. You would think there was no COVID-19 existing in the world. This is a little bubble of the world that's I'm living my life just like I want to. It was funny. I didn't see a mask. I didn't see people. People were out and about. It was crazy. So it was a little unnerving in that respect. But for the most part, we just stayed at the cabin and, took walks and things like that. So it was nice.
And you got to see family, right?
We did. We got to see my sister and brother-in-law. And then their two kids, which was really nice because we don't get to hang out with those two kids too terribly much. And they're both, 2 and 1 and, yeah, they're little. So it was good to kind of get to know them a little better almost.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah. How about you? What did you do this last weekend?
This last weekend, gosh.
That was a week away.
Yeah. I was what did I do? I think, we met up with some friends because Austin is open a little bit. So we went to an outdoor beer garden, which was really nice. So that was fun. And then we helped, our friends had just moved to our neighborhood, which is they share an alleyway with us, which is so much fun now. But they were renting before, so they needed to clean out the old house. So we're we'll just go and help you bust it out. I don't know how you feel, but I'm if me and my husband go and do something that's chore-ish together, inevitably we're probably going to fight. But if there's another couple there and it's more of a social thing, then it can become fun. So my friend is Trish. She's Trish, just let us come. So there'll be no fight. We'll just have fun. And she's oh my God, thank you.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, we're just we'll just go and like have a cleaning party instead of like, how come you didn't do this already? Or
Oh, I
like,
know. And so you
yeah.
said you're a newlywed for the most part, right?
Yeah, 2
2
years. We've been
years.
married 2
So
years. Mhm.
newish. Has
Newish,
it been
yes.
like a challenge for you? The like the first, did it feel really different? I guess is my question. When you guys
To be
officially got
married?
married? Uh-huh.
We had already lived together, so, it didn't I mean, in certain ways, I guess it kinda changed a little bit, but
Mhm.
it doesn't feel
Nothing major.
that that much different.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought it would, but no, I mean, I think sometimes it's like when you fight or there's like a more like permanency
Mhm.
to things,
Mhm.
so it's like where like you have to figure it out. It's not like, oh, I'm just
I'm just gonna
peace
leave.
out.
Right. Exactly it.
So it's like so in that regards, yeah, but for the most part it feels the
That's
same.
good. Yeah, I would
How
agree.
long
I would
have you
agree.
guys been married?
We've been married forever since 2002. So we're
Oh,
going
wow.
on like what is that? We're going on 20 years. I mean, it's not on
Oh my
exactly.
goodness,
Um,
it's huge.
so we're about to hit 19, and then yeah, next year will be 20. Is that right? Am I doing my math right?
That sounds great.
18? No, maybe you're at 18. I'm confusing myself. I don't
No, you're good.
know.
I think math is hard. Yeah,
Math
you're
is
right.
hard.
18 years.
Yeah, I was never good at math in my head. That's for sure. So yeah, it's been a long time for sure, but it doesn't. I don't know. It just feels normal. So it's good.
That's so good. I love it. Aw, so sweet. How did you guys meet? And then I'll start asking
Oh,
you business
no,
questions.
you're good. We actually met getting our MBAs at Texas A&M. So
Oh my
we both
gosh.
decided that the real world was too hard, and we decided to go
Yes.
back to school to get an MBA full time. So, like, it's a great reason to go back to school and like say, I'm quitting my job to go pursue
Yes.
higher education. And
Yes.
yeah, so we both met because it's a fairly small program, or at least it was at that time. So we got to know each
Yeah.
other through the program there. How about you and your
Oh my
husband?
gosh. We met at church. So he showed up to my small group. So I was like, oh,
Yes.
just kind of yeah. So it's good.
That's really good. I'm
Oh,
kind of adjusting. I want to be able to look at your face, but not look down. So I have my monitor behind me. That's why I'm doing some weird stuff. Like, does it look like
oh,
I'm
I
looking at
see.
you at this point?
It
Okay,
does.
good.
Yeah.
Because I have your
I'm
face
like,
behind me on a bigger monitor, and that way I can look at the camera and still see your face. So,
I'm like fixing my
yes, you're
hair.
cute.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
So do you. But yeah, well, do you want to kind of dig into it? Do you want to go over
absolutely.
anything
Is
first,
there
or
anything you'd like to go over first, just to make it easier on you or both of us? Or I'm
no?
very much a not. I mean, I've only had a couple of podcast interviews, so everyone's different.
Yeah, no, I think basic flow. I'll just ask you to introduce yourself and your company, and we'll go over how this all started, and then we're going to talk about managing your team remotely and
Mhm.
training. Right? Is that what you want?
Yeah, yeah, just, kind of staying connected and managing yourself and your team and even your boss a little bit.
Yes.
I figured we could do like one tip for yourself, one tip for your team, one tip for your boss.
Oh, that's so
And if
good.
you have a boss, if it's not your boss, then maybe it's just like a, coworker or a client even.
Yeah.
A client would work.
Oh,
So
that's so good. I love it, girl. I was watching your YouTube videos. I was like, I am pumped up for this
oh,
girl.
you're
She's so
sweet.
good.
Thank
No,
you.
you are. I was like, yeah, don't hit the snooze button. I was like, Jenny, what are you hitting the snooze button on? So I was
Yes,
like,
I'm trying to still figure out this message because I've been speaking since forever. I'm the kid that did the nerdy high school debate and
oh, I
contemporary
love it.
speaking in high school. But keynoting is very different than training, so I'm trying to figure out how to make it like this really motivational, like go out and conquer the world after you hear the speech kind of thing. But slowly
Yeah.
but surely. Thank you
Well,
though.
it's great. I was like, yeah, if you want, we can dig into that a little bit too. I'm just so intrigued
Thank
by
you.
what you're doing.
Oh, thank
So,
you. Yeah, feel free. Wherever it goes, you can take it there and
all
I'll
right,
go there.
cool.
So
Awesome. Yeah, and like I said, I think before, if I didn't say before, everything is edible, not edible, editable. So you
yes, knew
can,
exactly what you meant.
yeah, if we want to change anything, we can.
Okay.
So, all right, cool. Well, then I'll get us started and just say thank you so much for being on the show. And for everybody listening who hasn't heard of Courtney Ramsey, can you introduce yourself and your business?
Absolutely. So my name is Courtney Ramsey. I'm based in Dallas, Texas. So kind of I guess you could say in a nutshell, my history is primarily in corporate retail. So here in Dallas, I've worked for Neiman's and JCPenny most recently, Zale Corporation, which is the jewelers you typically find in the mall. And I did a lot of HR functionality for them as well as recruiting, but my love, my heart is in training and development. So did a lot of things with them for the past, 15 or so years. And about 2.5 years ago in 2017, I decided to take that leap and start my own business. So I left JCPenny on my own and decided to try this whole solopreneur thing. And that's how Courtney Ramsey Speaks LLC was born. And my goal is to have it a 50-50 business. So 50% of the time, I create and develop training for people who might need that service. So picture a company out there that maybe doesn't afford to have a training team on site and on staff 24/7 because there's just limited work. They might hire me to kind of outsource their training needs and have me
Wow.
create training or come in and just facilitate training that I've created. And then other companies might have a fully staffed training team, but there's just too much work, or they don't have the skill they might need to create something. So they might hire me for that too.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's
That's
50%. And then as we were talking about earlier, the other 50% is doing actual speaking, where companies and associations would hire me to come in and speak at conferences or big meetings they might have in either the form of a keynote speech or a breakout session.
okay. Wow. I just off mic, I was talking about how much I love your YouTube videos that you have up. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're such fire.
Thank
I
you. That's
yes.
incredibly good to hear because it's one of those things that when you know you love doing it, but you're like, gosh, I hope this is coming across how I want it to come across, you know?
It is. Well, if you're coming across as like a badass who knows her stuff, then you're like totally doing it. I'm just
Yeah.
like
Thank you.
so
I just need to
grateful.
call Jennifer every day and be like, Jennifer, can you just tell me that I'm
I'll
good?
be your best. I'll be your best friend. Well, how did you I mean, what made you kind of take that leap in 2017? You left JCPenney's, which sounds like it would be a great company to work for.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's a big
Well, with all this virus stuff going on and COVID, all retailers are having a hard time. So Penny's is definitely in that boat. But back then, they were, of course, doing better than they are now. And it's just one of those things, I know you have some history working too. So sometimes you keep climbing this corporate ladder, which when you're back in college, you have these big aspirations, like one day I'm gonna be the VP of blah blah blah. And then you start actually climbing the ladder and going up those positions to get there, and you realize it's not as fulfilling as maybe you wanted it to be. And that's what happened to me. I realized the higher I climbed, the less of the actual training and development work and facilitation that I love so much. I didn't get to do a lot of that. My job was
yeah.
becoming more managing the group, and they're doing it and I'm getting the results through them, which is great. And I still love the actual work itself. So I had to take a step
Right.
back and just think through, okay, you still have a lot of work left in you before you can retire. How do you want
Yeah.
to spend this time where you can get the most joy? And I figured I've got to try this entrepreneurship thing.
Gosh, I love it. That's so bold. I love that you just had that kind of honest conversation with yourself and I was like, no, like this isn't like something doesn't feel right or so it's not what I envisioned it to be. And I
Right.
think it takes a lot of courage to kind of have that shift and just be like, I'm not going to waste my time doing something that doesn't fulfill me. Like
Wow.
that's
Yeah,
that's
it
bold.
was scary, and trust me, I had it in my head or even longer, probably for the 2 years that I wanted to do this, and it took me some time to kinda get there and get bold enough to do it, but, I
Yeah.
don't regret it because I always feel like, that the last thing you wanna do is wait until you're 90 years old and think, "Oh, I wish I would've
Yeah.
tried this thing," when worst that could happen is you go out, it doesn't go as well as you had hoped, and you can go back to work somewhere, there's always a do-over, so
So true. I love it. There's always a do-over. That's so good. That should be a t-shirt or a coffee mug or something. That
there
should
you
be
go. That's our next venture. We're gonna go to Etsy with a t-shirt.
fun. Why not? Well, I guess when you started this venture in 2017,
Mhm.
and how did you start getting the word out there? Like you create a website, you
Right,
do the Instagram, like you do the things,
right.
and then how do you actually get your first customer or what does it even feel like when you get your first customer? I don't know. I just always think in anything I've done, like with the podcast, I'm always
Mhm.
like, what if nobody listens to
Oh,
it?
I know.
Or, oh my God, what if somebody listens to it?
Yeah.
Like, what
What
am
if
I
they
gonna
do
do?
and they think it's horrible? Yeah, I know. I
Yeah,
know. Trust me.
exactly. So if you get that first kiss, I'm thinking at least I can hide behind a microphone, but like you're going on stage. Like, how does that feel?
Oh.
Like, how do you pump yourself up for that? Like, what does that look
Mhm,
like?
mhm. I was kind of I feel like I did this all wrong. I mean, there are people who do a really fantastic job of having that safety net full-time corporate position, and they do
Yeah.
their side hustle, right? And they build up the
Mhm.
clients, and they get their confidence going, and, once they can replace at least half their income, then they go full-time or whatever it might be. I didn't do
Right.
any of that because I kinda did the cold turkey thing, which I do not recommend, but, like I told my boss basically 2 years ahead of time in a performance appraisal. She was telling me how they are looking through succession planning, and basically I was being selected to be succession planned into her role. And in
Okay.
my performance appraisal, I looked at her like, "Thank you, but I just don't think I want that. I think I need to find someone
Wow.
else." So she knew, and luckily I had the best ever boss, because not everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, really? You don't wanna do that? Sure, that's fine." She is amazing,
Oh,
and she is still the most fantastic boss I've ever worked for, but she was really
okay.
understanding. She's like, "Okay, well, when do you think you're gonna do this?" I'm like, "I have no idea."
No idea.
I just know eventually I wanna try my own thing, and so, she kinda knew about it, and so, about a year and a half later, I pulled her to an office. I'm like, "I think it's time. I don't
Oh,
know. I don't
wow.
really know. I don't have a client yet, but I think it's time. So let's work
Yeah.
towards this." And we had about another 4 months of progressive time where we found the right person and did some more transitioning over to where no one was left, uncomfortable, basically.
Right.
But going back to
That's
your
so
question about that first client, I was lucky that coming out of this JCPenney role, I did actually have one client and one contract that I could start working on immediately. And from there, it was a very, very, very lean first year. But just word of
yeah.
mouth is really where I found most of my clients, and reaching out to people who I knew beforehand, who had worked with me before. Because as you know, sales is pretty much finding people who like and trust you, right?
Yes.
And the people who I have worked with before knew my track record and were willing to kind
Yeah.
of put some things on my plate and give me a tryout, if you will.
That's so cool. I going back a little bit, you said there's about 4 months of transitioning out of your role. I'm asking a very selfish question because I'm currently transitioning from a former role to the beauty of a family business is that I can kind of just create whatever I
No
want. And
kidding. That's
so over
awesome.
the years, I've like skilled and I kind of felt like I got to that point where I was like, I either need to change my position or I need a new company. Like I
Mhm.
can't
Like, you
stay
can't,
in this
it's too
anymore.
repetitive almost.
Yeah, it's too repetitive. It was a lot. Still a lot of people management. I'm definitely more on the creative side. And I was like, I just felt like I was constantly having to do things that like I could do well, but they didn't come naturally to me. I didn't feel like it's like what I was put on this earth to do kind of thing. And so
Mhm.
I was like, I just need out. And so I've been transitioning to my new role, but I still have to take care of those old responsibilities and make sure that the people who are coming in to take over those responsibilities are well trained.
Yeah,
But I'm just hitting a wall with it, man. I'm just like, I want to be in my new role
I
already.
know.
So
I
like, did
know.
you feel that way at all, like, in those 4 months where you're just like, "Oh, man, like, mentally, I've already decided, like, it's time for me to go." So was it hard to stay, or did you not have that problem, I
I
guess?
think if I would have had more clients and more work waiting for me, I would have felt that way, but I was
Yeah.
still kind of in a scaredy cat mode knowing that,
Yes, that's so
"Oh,
true.
you're about to have no paycheck, Courtney. Like, this is serious. It's about to get real here."
It's
So
about to
it
get
wasn't that
real.
bad for me, but I know what you're saying because it's so hard, and I'm a trainer, and it was still hard for me to
Yeah,
figure out, how do I train someone up to do this role? Like, what do they really need? And so much of it
right.
is getting in the job and actually doing the work. So I hear where you're coming from. It's hard to mentally keep yourself there, but it's also hard to know what the person who's going to take over your role really needs. Because a lot of things you
Yeah,
just do inherently, you don't even realize you're doing them.
right.
Mhm.
So, how do you like, as someone who has so much expertise in training, like, is there a formula you follow or a thought process you go through? Like, how did you decide what actually matters? Because it's hard, I feel like, when you're so close to something. Like the program I'm teaching people to take over, I built it. So I'm just like, I've been doing it for the last 15 years. It's like brushing my teeth, like I don't need
Exactly.
someone to tell me to brush my teeth. And
Mhm.
so I miss a lot of steps and then I get frustrated because I'm like, how did you not know
I know.
to do that?
How are you not
It's like, and
psychic? How are you not in my
how did you
head?
not know this? So I'm just like, is there a process you go through or questions you should ask yourself? Or I guess, how do you do it?
Yeah,
What's the story?
one tip I would give you as a trainer is you always have to start with the end in mind. So think, is it
Mm,
Covey? Covey, right? Covey came up with that a long time
yeah.
ago with 7 habits. So begin with the end in mind and think through what behavior, like if you had to step back and look at this person, what would you want to see them doing to do your job well? Because if you focus on those behaviors, you can kind of think about what you need to back into. So just like with a training class, if you were to think of some learning objectives, like by the end of this time together, my replacement should be able to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
If you think through really clearly and start with the end in mind, that will help you back into what that person needs from you. The
That's so good.
Yeah, the other thing I would highly recommend is processize everything. I'm not even sure that's truly a word, but if you
Yeah,
as much as you
but
can
I
black
knew
and white
it.
it out, I mean, it needs to be a process, and I created so many checklists and copy paste email templates for things, or everything you can do. Like, think if you were to make, like, an ops guide for this person to have in
Yeah,
front of them and reference back, that's really helpful too.
so good. I love the idea of working backwards. I don't even know that never even occurred to me. I've been trying to like build it like a little piece here and a
Mhm.
little piece there. I immediately think I'm just like a bunch of Legos are out and I'm trying to build something, but
Yep,
I don't actually know what I'm trying to build. So I'm
yep,
just like,
that's exactly.
I like,
And it's hard if you do
yeah,
it that way because you're like, I don't even know what I need. But if you start with this thing, we got to get here. How do I work back into that? It's a lot easier for your brain to handle and kind of chunk it out.
oh, that's so good. Thank you. I was like, yeah, and I'm always afraid of like over processizing,
Yeah.
of like, you're like, oh, does that need to be a process? But I feel like, well, you might as well just make it a process. And then
Yeah,
once they can do something on their own, then they can tweak it however they need to. But
that's
there
exactly
should be a,
right. There's
yeah,
no harm in putting it on paper. And if that person finds a better way to do it, then greatness. But at least they have a place
right.
to start. And at least it's going to be
So
done to the best of their ability in the beginning versus them having to sink or swim. Because that's one of the reasons I'm so
yeah,
passionate about leadership training is there is nothing worse than having to figure out a job as you do it. And most people who are really high performers are put in that leadership role and told, okay, well, you were great in your former job, figure it out. And
figure it
how
out.
do you figure it out? It's something that you need to at least have some basis of knowledge to pull from.
Yes. Oh god, I love that. I needed that. I needed a little like smack down for that because I'm like just figure it out. Like leave me alone. I'm building my own thing over here, and I'm like, no, like don't be a bad person.
And
Like
you know what you have to remember
figure
too, I
out.
feel like you and I are probably a lot alike. We have had to figure it out before and we did it,
Yes.
right? So we're like, well, why can't
Right.
everyone do that? Why does everyone need so much
I
structure? I figured it out. Why can't you? Yeah, I'm
right.
exactly the same way. It's like, well, what do you mean you need more role clarity? I gave you
I
figure
gave
it
you. I
out.
told
Yeah.
you. Come on. Like yeah, just build it. And I'm so guilty of that. And I think that's really a hard part for me within the business or entrepreneurship. Like you start something because you love doing like you wanted to go back to not managing people but actually being the one to do the teaching or
Mhm,
build the program.
mhm.
And it's like I love that aspect and then figuring out how to train people. I'm like this is exhausting.
Right.
This is
And then, like
like
you said too, the leadership portion is just not for everyone either. It's good,
right.
and it's like I heard you say too. Can you do it? Absolutely. Can you figure it out? Absolutely. Does it come naturally and does it bring you joy? Not necessarily. So
Right.
that's a different thing too for a lot of people. There are people who are, to me, are more natural born leaders. I mean, you still have to learn some things, but there are people who just thrive on that. And there are
Yes.
others who really like doing the nitty gritty and the strategizing and the executing. And
Yes, I'm that. My husband is the leader. He's like, I want to make sure everyone has the tools they need and they can do the job, but I shouldn't be the one doing the job. And I'm like, I don't need anyone to have tools. I'll do it. Like, I got it.
Let me in there. Put me in there. I know.
So, so yeah, I appreciate that feedback. 'Cause I'm
Yeah.
like,
We have to give ourselves some grace, right? It's like,
so
it's okay to
true.
not
It's
be perfect at
so
everything.
hard.
It really is.
Ugh, it's so difficult.
Yes, it is. Mhm.
Yeah, because I just want it so bad.
I know.
But, okay, so for the actual, like, motivational speaker, you're doing keynote speaking, how does that how do you do that? Because how long is a typical keynote? Like, not to just total
No,
the
it
conversation.
depends on what the person in their company who hires you need. So,
Yeah.
most, I would say on average, most are 45 minutes to an hour long. That's pretty much the
Wow.
standard. Now, with TEDx talks becoming so popular, you do see
Yeah.
some people who are going to shorter formats, that kinda 18 to 25-minute range.
Wow.
Sometimes you might be planned for a 60-minute speech, and the person before you goes over, and you're like, "Oh, now you have 30. Go." So, it just depends on what the person needs, but I would say on average 45 to 60 minutes.
Wow. So I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're in there like building a training program or someone hires you to come in and like build up a training team or process, you have more time with people, right? So you're
Exactly.
like spending time and you're like really investing a lot of time in making sure that they get it. But with a keynote, you
Mhm,
have 60 minutes to
mhm.
really make a point and have it stick and have them leave with something to like go
Tangible,
transform their lives.
right?
So that feels like a lot of pressure, one, but how do you tailor your message to make it fit? Like how do you engage in the amount of time that you have?
It's hard, and to be honest with you, I think it's something that every good speaker needs to continue learning because it's always changing, and every client is different. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
upfront research you have to do. For example, I'm working on something with a company now, and I've already interviewed 10 of their employees, and I still want to do more interviews because it's kind of my job to get into what these guys face every day, what their culture is like. I want to use their vocabulary as much as I can. So if
Oh,
you call
smart.
your people team members and I call them your associates, that doesn't ring true for you, right? So I need
Right.
to kind of figure out all that language. So there's a lot of customization that you can do based on research. That's the first thing,
Wow.
and then you gotta get really again, begin with the end in mind. So when I'm talking to the person who's hiring me, I'm asking, "What do you want these people to think, feel, or do differently when they
Yeah.
leave from this speech with me or this 1 hour with me?" Because 'Cause you're right, it's very different. You only have 1 hour. You can't necessarily change the world in that hour, but you can hopefully give them that one nugget that changes the way they
Right.
think.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's so good. I love the attention to detail too. I never considered. You're right. Like some people say associates, we say team members.
Mhm.
Some people still say employees. So I'm
Exactly.
just like,
It could be very
God,
different. Mhm.
yeah, that's like a lot of like research ahead of time. I guess I always kind of assumed with keynotes, like you just have your bundled
Right?
speech and you go out and you do it. And
Mhm.
it's just like,
And,
but it doesn't.
there to be fair, there are people who do that. It's more of a canned approach, and for some people, it really works. I think nowadays, though, people are wanting more customization, and they want to really almost feel like they hired someone internally to give that speech. You're that into
Yeah.
it, right? You're that into their thought process and how things work. But I think that's you just said something that's really key for when people are hiring speakers, and they're like, "You get paid how much for a one-hour speech?" Because it's not a
Yes.
one-hour speech. I mean, if you're doing it the way most of us do it, it's hours and hours and weeks of prep to do it well. Mhm.
Gosh, that's so good. And I think a hard part about a business is also like deciding your price point and not caving on that, like not devaluing
Very.
your value. And so I think it is really important to very, very like clearly state what you get. So before I always wanted customers to think things were easy. Like, oh, it's fine.
"We
Like
got
we're just taking care
this."
of it. Everything's easy breezy. And now I'm like, you know what? This is not easy. And like, this is what goes into it. And this is why you pay more because we deliver food, right? And they're like, well, I can get it at Costco for X. I was like, that's cool. Go ahead and drive over to Costco, pay your membership for Costco,
Right.
call it all back to your office, get out your little dolly, go up the elevators, unpack it all,
Yep.
and then magically bring it all back tomorrow and clean and sanitize everything while you're doing that. So I'm
Yeah.
just like,
No,
if
you're
you compare
completely
just
right.
the price, it's like, no, I think customers, you kind of need to educate. You need to educate your customers in a kind way. Like I just had a little attitude there because I get mad about it, but like in a kind, informative way, let them know that, you know, you're not just paying me for an hour on stage. You're paying me because I'm not just going to give this canned approach. I'm going to cater my message to meet your
Right.
team members where they're at.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when you really start
So
thinking through of like even with your customers, I mean, the time it would take for them to do that weekly Costco run and everything, you're
yeah,
paying for that time savings and everything else. So I'm with you. You have to help people understand where you're coming from.
right. So good. Well, for training, I know we talked a little bit about like team management and how life is so different with COVID going on, and a lot of people are having to manage teams remotely now.
Yes.
And I know that you've prepared some tips for the audience, so I was
Yeah.
hoping we could kind of dig into it a little bit and just talk about it. We know that um, people are doing Zoom meetings now and they're having to check in remotely. And now there's talks of going back to the office.
Mhm.
So I think the tips kind of apply to team management one way or the other. But
Yes.
if you want to kind of dig in and let us know what you prepared, I'd love to get into it with you.
Yes. Well, it's funny you say that because I just did a webinar kind of program. I say webinar. To me, it was more of a virtual program because we had some interaction. Webinars to me are just me talking to a camera and
Yes.
you just hope someone's listening and they're not on Facebook, you know? Yeah, that's so this was actually I could see people's faces and everything. But it's funny because this company had just started coming back to their office locations, but they were still very separated in their offices. They could only see certain people on our team. They still couldn't do in-person meetings. So they would be in their office taking a Zoom call for their meeting, even though they're all like next door to each other. So even
Yeah.
for people who are coming back from this truly sheltering in place environment, it looks very different when you're at work. So the hot
Yeah.
topic that we're seeing is like, how do you stay engaged and connected still when you're either working from home, truly 100% remotely, or even if you're back at work and things are just not the normal?
The
Yeah.
normal. You
So,
know, we've had a lot of customers decide not to go back to the office,
mhm.
but because they were like, we don't want to go back to that type of culture. Like, we've had a customer who said, like, we just love being around each other and we're a hugging team and we're a high five team. And they're like, we eat our lunches all together. And so the idea of not being able to sit down and have lunch together, or the idea of not being able to like hug each other when we walk in, like, we just don't want,
Like why? Like,
we just
well, yeah, it's not even worth
don't
it,
want
huh?
that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're like, we just don't want to have to feel like so sterile next to each other. And I was like, oh, I get that, but kind of sad they're not going back. But that's
I
okay.
know, right? You're like, well, for me, I
I'm
really wish y'all to go back.
like, oh, could you please come
Do
back?
you need home
But
snack delivery?
yeah, right. Exactly. That's the immediate question that they get asked.
How
They're
about a
like,
snack
which
box?
can go goodie box? Yeah.
Yes, I'm with you. And I was like, I can pivot, as I say, I can pivot this into something you need. No, I know,
Exactly.
and
We
I get
will
where they're coming from too, because I think we're all kind of guessing as to what the new normal is going to be. Is like, are we ever going to be able to like handshake again and feel good about it? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
But
okay,
yeah,
so we can still engage, even if we can't high five, we can engage. So,
yeah.
what are like, how do you recommend people stay engaged, either with themselves, with coworkers, with their employer?
Mhm.
Like, what's
Yeah.
kind of
Well,
the
let's start with, yourself because I
yeah?
think, I mean, you might not be able to tell it, but I'm a natural introvert. So
I did not tell that. I was like, shut up right now. You
yes,
are not.
yes. So all that means is I like to say, I think I read somewhere in this book called Quiet, like think of it, there be a social gas tank. My gas tank never is more than half full. So I drain really fast. So I love the interaction, but I deplete really fast and I have to have that
Yeah,
recuperation time. So there's the introverts that have, that side. And for people like me, I can work from home all day long and be perfectly fine with it. Like you too?
yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
Like, I don't
I
care if
love
I ever
it.
have to go back to an office,
No, me either.
right? And then you probably have some salespeople on your team who this is killing them,
They hate it.
right?
Yeah, they want to go back.
A lot of salespeople are just those natural extroverts where they're energized by going out and being around people. And that's where they get their energy. So them being in their own house with maybe just their family for 8 weeks is really draining. So I always say, no matter which side of the fence you fall on, you have to find what works for you and try to recreate a routine that works for you.
Oh, so good.
So for my extroverts out there that need the interaction, I mean, schedule these Zoom calls at the very least. If you're not reaching out to people and getting this interaction through a Zoom call or through a FaceTime, whatever it might be, seeing people is going to help you. So you might be doing more reaching out and scheduling more face-to-face as much as you can meetings to get that going for you. If you're an introvert, maybe you're just fine not seeing people, but there are certain things you do need. Maybe for you, it's your workspace. Maybe it's a friend of mine works for Toyota and she has a standing desk in the corporate office. And she was noticing from working from home, not having that standing desk was really hurting her. So she had to find a way to prop things up where she could stand and get things done a bit better for her, where she felt more comfortable and she felt more in the zone, Not having a double screen for some people is a big deal. People like their multiple monitors. So you might need to, buy a monitor. But the first thing to me is to be more connected and engaged with work. You've got to do and recreate whatever it is you're missing the most from your normal work.
So good. And I love the idea of it's like your physical environment and your like emotional, mental environment. It's not just one or the other, and just like being in tune, because I'm a lot like you in that like I love engaging with people, but I want it like in small segments, like I don't like to go all day like I get like just really drained, and I feel like because you just like when I engage with people, I want to be like at a certain level and like I have fun and I love being around them. But then it's like, okay, I need to go like,
I'm the exact same way.
Yeah. So being in the office all day, I didn't like, I mean, I've been working from home for a while now, but I used to get frustrated because I love to do the work. And if there's people like, I would say my office was like a revolving door. It was just like people and more people. And I'm like, oh my God, please leave me alone.
I can't focus.
He loves the people. He's like, no, it makes us connected and we're all a part of a team. And I'm like, I can know I'm a team because I have a Slack or an email and it's fine.
Exactly. So, yeah, you and I are the same person. I'm pretty much certain we are the same.
I think so.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I'm a very much nose to the grindstone, get this stuff done. I want to go home at 5:30 kind of person.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, every time people come in my office, I'm like, the more I talk to you, the longer I'm here. And I'm like, time is money, and I got my own people I want to go see. Like
I have a happy hour at 6:00. I'm leaving.
Exactly. I have reserved my energy for happy hour.
That's right. I want to knock this out. I want to go have a martini. Yeah.
Have a martini. I love it. That's so true. So the first idea is replicate what was working for you at the office.
Recreate that sense of normalcy, that sense of routine, specifically on what's working for you that you miss the most.
So good.
Awesome. So if you take care of yourself, usually your team comes next. And to me, that could be if you're on a team and you're just a member and you don't have to truly manage someone, or if you're leading a team, that team interaction is really important. So you have to think through, how are you going to establish that? So something that works for me that, again, going back to the introvert thing, I'm the nose to the grindstone girl. So I don't naturally think I need to make sure I connect with X, Y, and Z today, right? If it happens, it happens. That's great. But I don't do it on purpose. You got to start doing it on purpose. Yeah.
I know. Oh, it's so hard. But I believe that to be true. I believe it. I know what you're saying is the truth.
Yes, exactly. So, and this is actually a tip I got from a really good friend of mine who is a co-founder of a marketing agency here in Dallas called Luminary 2. She was like, you know what, Courtney, you've got to schedule it on your calendar. She's like, every day at 11 o'clock, I put a team member's name on my calendar, and that reminds me to ping that person in some way. So maybe it's I Slack them, maybe I text them, maybe I call them, maybe we have a one-on-one meeting, but I need to remember not to get so lost in all my work that I forget about my team members. And this at least reminds her to physically do it. Because it will completely go, I'll be like, oh, that's a good idea. But, 3 hours later when I've been in this project, and in the groove, right? I'm in the flow. That's not what I'm thinking about.
No, me either.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's good. I love the idea of the calendar because I live by the calendar. So I'm like,
Exactly.
if it's in the calendar, then I'll do it. A little bit of a tangent, but did you ever watch The Greatest Showman?
I do.
The,
This Is
I
Me is my favorite song.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. I love it. But that is my favorite one from the soundtrack. But recently, I don't remember what it is, but it's like the one where he's coming back home and he remembers like who all this was for. Like he got like caught up in the moment. I was running to it the other day. I just started like
Totally.
bawling. I was like, you have to remember the people, Jenny. Like you've got to remember the people. But
Mm-hmm.
it's so hard for me because it doesn't come naturally to me. I'm
I
like,
know.
no, I have a presentation I gotta do. I've gotta like update the website, like all of the things. And I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
but it's for the people. So
Right.
I'm like,
Exactly. We have a bad habit of prioritizing the other things, like
yes,
I always call them, I don't know if you deal with fires every day. I think everyone has those fires that you weren't expecting it. It was not on your to-do list, but now you have this
yes,
thing and you got to fix it right now. And it makes everything else go to the wayside. And those fires are constant and nonstop. And
all-
you focus on that and not the important stuff, right?
mhm,
So if you put it in your calendar, to your point, a lot of us do live and die by the calendar. And so it helps it
yes.
get done.
It's so true. I to that point of like the important things going by the wayside, I heard someone recently say HIPAA and LIPA activities. Have you heard of that?
HIPAA and LIPA,
So
no.
yeah,
I
I
knew
didn't
HIPAA
either.
about the privacy law, but no.
No, so yeah, so HIPAA and LIPA, and I googled it afterwards, and I was like, I think this is unique to their business. Like they created this, but it's high impact income producing activities and low income
Mm,
impact producing activities. I got that from Kathy Donovan at Retail Mavens, but she
nice.
it was so good. And she's like, the high impact, she's like, those are the things that only you can do.
Yeah,
And you need to make sure that those are staying on your calendar and that the other things, the low impact, are the things that anyone can do. Like with the podcast, only I can interview because
right.
it's my
Your podcast.
podcast. But I could outsource the editing to somebody,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh, I was like, I needed that. And I think it's like, if I did a better job of trusting other people with the LIPA activities, I feel like I would have more time in my schedule to invest in the people the way that I know I should be.
That's
But
exactly
because I'm
right.
just like, oh, no, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, then there's not a lot of time left over
Mhm.
for the investment in people, which is arguably a HIPAA activity. So,
Totally. I think you're completely correct. And it's funny. I teach a class on delegation and we talk about the same thing. It's like sometimes there are
mhm,
things that you keep on your plate because even though it's a LIPA activity, you like doing it.
I do
Right?
it.
Especially for you, like
Yes.
I can tell you're probably a constant learner like me. Like you're like, maybe I'm not the best at editing this stuff, but I kind of like learning it.
Oh,
Look at me. I'm
yeah.
a sound editor, right? So we keep it on our plate knowing it's taken me 5 hours to do this. I could give it to someone on Fiverr for $10. Right?
Yes.
And we don't do it because we're like, I'm gonna learn this
Yeah,
skill. But yeah,
you can
I'm
do
with
it.
you. You got to figure it out. Who can you delegate it to? Because it's probably going to save you a ton of time.
Ton
And
of time.
and you might be able to, train someone up on your team too. To me, the best way to develop someone is to delegate. It's free and you're
Oh,
giving them access to gaining a new skill they're going to eventually need. So,
so good. I love it. The best way to train someone up is to delegate.
mhm,
Because sometimes I feel like with delegation, it's like, no, I'm just giving you something I don't want to
right,
do, but it's something the company needs. So,
right.
especially right now with people needing work, I'm like, well, it's almost selfish to keep this on your plate, Jenny. So,
Exactly. That's a really good point of looking that's a good way of looking at it too. Yeah, I always say
yeah.
you can't give them all the crummy work that you don't wanna do, even if it is necessary, because it is gonna feel like they're just being dumped on. But if you can give them
Yes.
both things and explain the why behind it, like, "Listen, this isn't a fun activity. I know it's not. Here's why you need to learn it, and here's why it still needs to get done," right? Or, "Here's something I really love. I'm handing it off to you, and I know it's gonna help you when you want to be in this role, it's gonna really help you," you know? So
Oh, that's so good.
yeah.
I love the balance of the both and the explaining the
The
why.
why is
Because
huge. Mhm.
the why is important. I forget the why
I do
sometimes,
too.
but, like, I never actually say it, but I feel like it's the old, like, parent stand by when it's like, "Why?" Because I said
Because I
so,
said so.
like, I'm like, I don't
You're mom.
actually say it, but I feel it sometimes, yes,
I'm
and
with
I'm
you.
like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I know better than to say it.
I know. I know. It's so hard though, because again, it's just, especially when we're in a hurry, we just want to be like, and do this, right? Here's the how, do it. But we don't always take
Yeah.
the time to say the why, and the why is really important for sure.
Yeah. And I've noticed too, when I don't take the time to say the why, when I just do that quick handoff, they might do it that one time, but it's not a sustainable thing. So
True.
it's not like I didn't give them any like structure in place to make sure that it continues on past that moment. I
Right.
just the quick firefighting fix and was like, no, just go. Like there's a fire, like dump it out any way you possibly can. So
Exactly. Yeah.
being like, if we put out a fire this way, it conserves the most energy or something, So
I'm telling you, yeah, no one realizes just how big of a process delegation really is if you do it well. But I'm with you. I'm with you. If you do it well, you do it the right way, it can become a learning experience and it's sustainable.
nice. And are you still doing like the course like that? You said you have a delegation course.
Yeah,
Is
it's one of
that
the breakout topics that I do a lot at corporate and corporate conferences for leadership. Because
nice?
people want to delegate, but they don't necessarily know how, or they've had a bad experience with it, right? I delegated this thing and it completely fell through the cracks and it was a huge embarrassment, maybe. So I
Yeah,
do teach people how to do that, or I can come in and just do it as a class for a company.
nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. I love it. I mean, like, there's so many aspects to your business that I didn't realize
It's
beforehand.
fun.
So good.
And again, it's fun teaching people things like that because it's stuff you need, but no one necessarily teaches you how to do as a leader. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So good. Okay, so that was number
that
two,
was for
which was
2.
make sure you stay engaged, put it on your
Yep.
calendar, check in with
Yeah, and that, like I
people.
said, that's for if you're a boss of people or if you're a peer. I mean, even your peers need peer-to-peer engagement, so don't forget to reach out to them, even if you're just a high performer on your team. And then the third one would
Totally.
be, how do you stay connected with your boss? Because
Yeah.
if you are climbing that corporate ladder and you want to stay visible, right? And maybe you're
Right.
doing lots of things that your boss could see when you're in the office, but now they can't see that anymore.
Yeah.
So there's 2 things I recommend. And the first is just send some more emails. I mean, this is probably the time to over communicate. So maybe on a Monday, you send that email saying, this week, this is what me and my team are going to accomplish. This is our focus for the week. And on Friday, you send that wrap up email saying, okay, we talked about this. This is what got done. Here's some status, just so they can physically see what it is you're working on and the value you're bringing to the business. So that's more of the technical thing.
I think it's smart though, because I feel like a lot of employers, they're they're like so far up that they don't realize all of the things that have to happen in a day. Like, they don't they know that it gets done, but it's almost like
Magic.
magic. Yeah, it's like, oh, that was so easy. And
Yeah.
it's like actually that website update took 2 hours and
Exactly.
like all these meetings. And so yeah, I think it's kind of
Yeah.
like it's important to educate. It's in the same way you educate your customer. Sometimes you need to like educate your employer a little bit.
I'm completely
Yeah.
with you because you're right. There's a lot of things that get done inherently that maybe even you as the leader of your team don't realize. So asking your
Yes.
team to say what they're working on, and you might go, oh, I didn't realize you're doing that. That's how that gets
Yeah.
done, right? So it could help you really appreciate your team more too. So I
So
definitely recommend
true.
that. And if your boss reads it, great. And if they don't, that's okay too. But at least they have it at their fingertips to see.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I recommend is, and this is again back for people who maybe don't focus on the relationships as much, because my guess is if you are already doing it, I mean, if you're an extrovert and you love the stuff, you're already doing it. But find those reasons to reach out to your boss or your boss's boss more informally to get
Mm,
side conversation going where it actually helps build your relationship with that person. And again, this is going back for people like me who, again, nose to the grindstone. I didn't have the habit of getting up and walking by my boss's office and just saying, hey, what's
hi.
going on today? That felt cheesy
Right.
to me. That felt like I'm wasting her time. I'm wasting my time. She doesn't want to talk to me. Like, who am I, right? But if you find something you both have in common, you find that common ground, and you swing by the office, not only are you building the relationship with that person, but you're talking about something that you both have an interest in and
Yeah.
you're benefiting from, right? So,
So good.
so an example for me is, my son had started playing sports and just, as a 4-year-old. And then my boss's boss, who I really needed to work on building that relationship with had 3 kids, all of which played sports. I could walk by
Wow.
her office and start talking about that, or, like, did your kid really stink at soccer when he was 4? Like, Was it hard for you to watch him play soccer? Like, you could have those conversations where you could actually get some advice and maybe
Oh
some,
my gosh.
funny things happening, but you're still building that relationship inherently too, and I think that's hugely important.
That's so good. I love that idea of finding the common ground. It's something we teach our sales associates too.
Yep.
It's like no, like don't go in and talk to them about coffee. Like bring it in the conversation, but go in and like notice the pictures
Yes.
on the desk, or like if they have a soccer trophy behind them, like
Yeah.
have those conversations. And we teach them like log all of that, and not like in a dirty sales
And,
way,
like,
but in
yeah.
like it's like have like a real of like actually care about the person that you're providing the service to, so for people who are working remotely right now, when you can't just actually physically walk by an office, do you have any suggestions on how to kind of have that engagement with your employer now? Like how do you is
So
it Slack, is it email, like what does that look like?
it might kind of look the same way, just with some texting or whatever. So, a friend of mine, one of the people who actually gave me this tip before that really worked too, she was talking about how she was at Trader Joe's and she bought a basil plant. And she knows that her boss's boss or her boss, whoever someone it was really into
Yeah.
gardening. And granted, could she come home and Google how to grow a basil plant? Probably. But she decided to
Probably.
take advantage of that and she sent a quick text and said, "Hey, I just bought this basil plant. Do you have time for a few quick tips?" And it
Oh,
was just
that's
a way
so
for this person to
good.
connect and to talk about something she knew this person loved, which was gardening. So, just send a quick
Amazing.
text, send a Slack, whatever it might be, and just say, "Hey, this is kind of random, but do you have time to talk about this?" And there's a
Wow,
pretty
that
good
is
chance
so
they
good.
will. Yeah.
I love it. It's like, do you need to Google it, or is there somebody you can ask and, like, build that connection?
Exactly. And I think that's the key is like look for those reasons to find that genuine connection where it doesn't feel so icky, manipulative, like I'm doing this to
Yeah,
build a relationship so I can get ahead. It shouldn't feel like that to you. It should feel natural. So look for those places
right.
where it can feel natural.
Oh gosh, that's so good.
Mhm.
Those were great tips. Thank you
You're
so
so
much.
welcome. Glad you liked it.
Yeah, so good. I know we're getting kind of close to the end of our
Mhm.
time, but on your website and YouTube, there's this thing, and if you have time, I thought we could talk about it. But you mentioned like not hitting the snooze button
Yes.
in life. Can you say kind
Mhm.
of just like briefly what that means, and then we'll send everybody to your website and they can watch the YouTube video to get more on it, but I was like, "Oh, that'll preach." So
Oh, I
I'm
love it.
just
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for bringing that
yeah,
up. Yeah. So that's kind of my catchphrase. And if you hire me to speak, a lot of times that's kind of where we start with the theme of the conversation because that's kind of the main message I want people to take away when they listen to me speak, which is for me, I think the snooze button exists on more than just our alarm clocks or our cell phone now, right? We hit snooze all the time and we don't realize we're doing it, but we're putting off those things that are really important, but are usually uncomfortable. So
Mhm.
they're the things that kind of like we were talking about earlier, the fires, and we put off the
Yeah,
people part. The people part, it's what drives our business. It's what the people
yeah,
part is what keeps people engaged and keeps people productive. And yet we're hitting snooze on our people so often because we're focusing on firefighting. So
mhm,
examples of things we're probably snoozing on as leaders would be delegating, right? Because it's easier to just do
yep,
it yourself. Developing your people. It's like, oh, I know they want to be a manager of people one day and they're, a specialist right now. I'm gonna get to that eventually. We'll get to it eventually. And we never get to it, right? And then they
never get
leave. Giving feedback.
I think
That's a hard one.
ooh,
I mean,
feedback.
oh my gosh, people put off that one because it's uncomfortable. No one likes to have a feedback conversation unless it's you're doing
Ooh,
great, right? Those are great.
right,
But if I have to bring you in and say, "Hey, Jennifer, things aren't going so well. What's going on?" That's uncomfortable for everyone, and we put those things off. Or
yeah,
like I say, we hit snooze on it. But it's something that's going to come full circle eventually where you have to take care of it. And then now you can't hit snooze anymore. And it's a big problem. So whether it's the person is really bringing down your team or they leave completely or whatever it
mhm.
might be, we have to stop hitting snooze.
Gosh, that is so good. For anybody who wants to connect with you afterwards, who wants to have you come and bring the stop hitting snooze
Yes.
message, to their team or wants to learn more about delegation, where can they find you?
So my website is Courtney Ramsey Speaks, and it's CourtneyRamsey, and the word speaks. I have to say that because, the Kardashians changed up the spelling of Courtney. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, so it's original spelling. But then my email is just simply Courtney at Courtney Ramsey Speaks. So you can find me either way. And if you just Google Courtney Ramsey Speaker, you should find me pretty easily.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, which I hope you did, make sure you subscribe so that you never miss what's next. If you really enjoyed it, I'd be super grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes or anywhere that you listen. And if you really enjoyed it, then I'd love if you'd share it with a friend. Last but not least, make sure you're following us on Instagram at The Vendor's Daughter for a behind-the-scenes look at my personal and professional life, and for what I hope is a little bit of daily inspiration as we walk this crazy journey together.